Dear students, today we are going to learn about the birth of the Church. Preparation for Pentecost. During the Last Supper and before the Ascension, Jesus promised that he would send his disciples the Holy Spirit. And by the Spirit's power, the apostles would continue the mission of Christ. While preparing for the descent of the Holy Spirit, the apostles, Mary, and other disciples were gathered in prayer. Mary, who had the Holy Spirit overshadow her after the Annunciation, was helping the disciples to be open to the gift of God. Peter interpreted the scriptures. He decided that they must elect another apostle to replace Judas, and there needed to be 12 to fulfill the 12 tribes of Israel. The replacement had to be an eyewitness of the resurrection. So after narrowing it down to 2, Justus and Matthias, they cast lots and the Lord chose Matthias. On the night before Jesus died, he promised to send the Holy Spirit. And on the day, the Holy Spirit descended upon the apostles, and this day is called Pentecost. It is considered the birthday of the Church, but it was just the final stage in the planning of the Church. The beginnings of the Church can be found in the Old Testament. God formed a covenant with Abraham and his descendants, and these people were set apart, or ecclesia. In the New Testament, the Greek word means assembly. Later in the Old Testament, the people formed into a kingdom and had a vicar, and the Holy Spirit is the soul of the Church. Now, the Church is the deposit of grace, the deposit of faith, and mission of the Church. Now, deposit of grace means the graces of salvation merited for us by the death and resurrection of Jesus. Deposit of faith means the truth given to the apostles that Jesus revealed during his years of public ministry and during the 40 days after the resurrection. And the mission of the Church is to lead all people to God. Let us now learn about the life of the early Christian community. Luke, the author of Acts, tells us 4 pillars that characterized the early Christians. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. This is found in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2, verses 42. The apostles' teaching was accompanied by signs which shows that Jesus' ministry continues through them. Christian fellowship included concrete deeds of support as well as a life of charity. And the breaking of bread is an ancient name for the Eucharist and recalls that the sacraments were very important to early Christians. And prayer also in the early church included certain memorized prayers as well as particular times of prayer. Jewish persecution of Christians. Due to the apostles' early signs and success in bringing the Jewish people to Christ, the Israelite leaders began a persecution against the apostles and all the followers of Christ. The persecution was led by both the Sanhedrin, who put Jesus to death, and then to Herod Antipas. The apostles were arrested, imprisoned, and scourged. Some were even martyred. The Sanhedrin wanted to kill the apostles, but was stopped by the Rabbi Gamaliel because, according to him, he said, if the apostles' work is of human origin, it will fail. But if it is from God, it is unstoppable. The first martyrs. The first martyr of the church is Saint Stephen. He was one of the 7 deacons that was ordained by the apostles. He was arrested and taken before the Sanhedrin, where he gave a powerful speech about the mystery of Christ. Because of this, he is stoned and, like Christ, prayed for those who kill him. Saul is here consenting to Stephen's death. Another person who is the first martyrs of the church is Saint James the Greater. He is the brother of John. He was the first apostle to be martyred. Herod beheaded him. God used this persecution of the Christians to spread the gospel. The Christians fled from Jerusalem to Judea, Samaria, Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Antioch. Conversion of Saul. Saul was Pharisee who strictly followed the law of Moses. He saw Christianity as a great threat to the tradition of the Jews. He zealously persecuted the church and put many Christians in prison. On his way to Damascus to arrest Christians, he experienced a blinding light and heard the voice of Christ. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Jesus identifies himself with the church. In the meantime, a disciple named Ananias had a vision of the Lord, telling him to meet Saul and open his eyes. He was reluctant at first because of Paul's reputation of persecution. The Lord tells him that Saul is his chosen instrument to preach the gospel to the Gentiles. When they meet, Saul is baptized. One of the first issues that the church had to deal with was to do with the Gentile converts to Christianity. Main issues are: do Christians have to follow all of the Mosaic law? In the early days of Christianity, most Christians saw themselves as a part of Judaism and still followed Jewish laws and customs such as circumcision, dietary laws, ceremonial laws. As more and more Gentiles converted to Christianity, this became a very important issue. Peter converts the Gentile Cornelius, who receives the Spirit without being a Jew. After Paul gave the gospel to many Gentiles, some Jewish Christians intervening, saying they need to be circumcised and they need to practice the Mosaic law. There are two positions in regard to whether the Gentiles had to follow the entire Torah. Anyone who converts to Christianity must take on all the laws and customs of Judaism. And secondly, Christ freed us from the burden of the old law. As we have come to the end of this chapter, I would like you to go through this activity. First, individually, read about the circumcision, the dietary law, and the ceremonial laws. For example, in circumcision, you will read in Genesis chapter 17, verses 10 to 14, and lists who must be circumcised and what happens if one is not circumcised. Dietary laws, you will find it in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 3 to 21, and lists two laws concerning food that the Jews had to follow. Third, the ceremonial laws, you will find it in Leviticus chapter 23, and here you will list two feast days that the Jews had to celebrate. Then list one thing that had to be done on each feast day.